Welcome back to Guys Improvise, the MGI podcast. You were listening to the voices of
Chill with Realms,
Oshim, the one and only. And for today, we have a special guest co-host, Parvision. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Hey everyone, I'm Parvision, new channel on YouTube. I mostly make content around One Piece and anime, but looking to make more content with Marvel and Arcane. And I have a video on Spider-Man already and a theory video, thinking about making more of that soon, especially with the Doctor Strange movie coming up. So thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for joining. Multiverse of Madness. I'm glad that you mentioned that as well. We're here today to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. Parvision, as he was mentioning, did do a reaction video and has a theory video. I'll link both of those in the description of this video. So I wanted to finally have the chance to talk about this movie. It came out in December, so some of the hype has died down, but I feel like it's still, this year so far, one of the most talked about movies, especially during the pandemic, because it had so much hype going into it. It was being filmed ever since 2019, before the pandemic had started, but it broke so many records. Right now, I think it's standing at somewhere around $1.8 billion. Not only is it the biggest movie during the coronavirus, but it's also just one of the biggest movies of all time. I think it's in like the top 5 or the top 6 highest grossing movies ever. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is just like a hype check, because the last time I was this excited for a movie was The Dark Knight Rises, which came out exactly 10 years ago, 2012. And I thought, like, before that movie came out, I thought it was going to be like one of the best superhero movies ever. The same year, the first Avengers movie came out and The Amazing Spider-Man 1, which is technically relevant to this movie. But that's how hyped I was. Like, this is the most hyped I have been since a movie like that. And I think this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, is better than The Dark Knight Rises. But I'm curious if it was the same for you guys. Were you guys as hyped as I was going into like the theater to go and see this?
I can say I was definitely just as hype about the Batman movie. And I was laughing in the back because I actually had a date for that movie and they didn't show up. They might have showed up and we couldn't find each other or whatever, but I ended up watching the movie by myself and it was like such an amazing movie. I didn't even care.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with I was a little younger, so the whole Dark Knight, I wasn't that into movies, but Dark Knight, like watching it, I'd say like even now that movie's like top tier hero movie. Like there's just like the plot of it, the feel of it. Even with this movie, with Spider-Man No Way Home, like a lot of memes, and not memes, but like there was discussion that William Dafoe, his performance here was greater than the Joker. And I was like, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if it's like the character like parallel and the gravity of what they played in each other's movies, it made sense. Sure, he could be a great Joker. That's been going on. But, you know, in terms of this movie, I try, especially with like going into phase 4, I've been hampering my expectations because, like, you know, at the end of phase 3, everything's insane. And then going to phase 4, a lot of things change. So I tried to, like, you know, give everything like start at baseline, right? And Spider-Man was really hard to do because all the leaks, all the spoilers, all that stuff. So I was definitely like really excited going into it. And given the pandemic, I was talking with you about it, where I couldn't exactly go opening weekend, and every Marvel movie I go opening weekend. And so that definitely hurt. But the thing was, like, seeing the theater reactions, like going into it, and then even a week later, I went a week later to like random ass place in the middle of nowhere so that it'd be the furthest away from Corona. Even there, the theater was hype. I was like, I've never experienced something like that. So going into it, I would say the hype met what I saw. That's what I'd say.
Okay, so the hype met your expectations, or like...
Yeah, I feel like it delivered for sure.
Awesome. Okay, Rams, I just want to touch on a thing that you were saying before. I know what it feels like. I never went to the movies like with a date and then the date didn't show up, but I do know what it's like to want to go to the movies with someone and then they don't show up, but you're like excited to see the movie, so you go and see it anyway. I know what that's like too. But not the best feeling, but yeah. I agree with you guys in terms of like, what this movie means, like coming out during the pandemic and the hype that's gone on around it. As far as being a Spider-Man movie itself goes, like, yeah, when I went to go see it, and it was only one time that I went to go and see it, the theater was pretty packed, but it was an IMAX theater. So the seats were pretty like spaced out. Like nobody kept their mask on. Like you had to show your vaccine card to go and see it. But
Yeah.
people had snacks and stuff, they had drinks. So nobody like kept their mask on while watching the movie. But thankfully, like we were fine. I was fine and my girlfriend was fine, like going to and from the movie. Like we were perfectly fine as it was. Now, some people say that one of the inspirations for this movie was the animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I thought was the best Spider-Man movie I had ever seen. It was animated, maybe not the best Spider-Man adaptation, but the best Spider-Man movie. Now, if both of you fellas have also seen that movie starring Miles Morales as the main character, before going into a deep dive conversation about this movie, I just want to check and see, do you think No Way Home is as good as that or better or not as good? Just curious.
Have you watched it?
Yeah, I did watch it. For me, yeah, I enjoyed it more than the Into the Spider-Verse.
It's hard to make like it feel even. I talked about this in my reaction thing because like given that what No Way Home did, like you can have a cameo in animations. You could be 50-year-old like throwback, run back of anything. You could do that, right? But to do that in a live action, that's just like it's just it doesn't matter what you do in animation. But in terms of like story, Into the Spider-Verse, I also think that movie is more of like a setup thing. Like it set up what Sony and the Spider-Man franchise wants to do in the future, and we could talk about that later because it relevant to like the theory that I was talking about. But I think that movie did do a good job. I think the main character, like it was new to me. I think Miles Morales is actually like a newer like comic book creation. It's not like an older one. Is actually based off of I learned this recently. It was based off of Childish Gambino, Donald Glover. He was supposed to be Miles Morales, and they make jokes about it too. And so when in Far From Home, they let him onto the thing because like he was supposed to be Miles Morales, and Miles Morales was based off of Donald Glover because he's a huge Spider-Man fan. So when I found that out, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I wish he was the Spider-Man. That'd have been sick. So and I think Sony does have like something that they want to do with him. So not too sure. But yeah, movie, I think people ranking wise, I was surprised because in various rankings, I forget the sites names, but like the ranking sites name, they have Into the Spider-Verse as number one. Some of them have Spider-Man 2, like the original Spider-Man 2 as the number one Spider-Man movie, then Into the Spider-Verse, then No Way Home. So it's all up there for me. It all is super enjoyable for sure.
Hey, touching on the Donald Glover one, I loved how they actually poked at it and was like, "Oh, I thought you'd be a black Spider-Man or something like that." Like,
yeah.
It kind of gave like that little hint, like they may actually go through and do that with him.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to bring Miles Morales into the MCU eventually. And I think with Jamie Foxx's character Electro, right? That's who he was, Max Dillon. The fact that he mentioned that, oh, there's got to be a black Spider-Man out there, that was basically a subtle hint that Miles Morales is coming in this universe. That's the way I took it anyway.
Yeah. It could be.
Donald Glover, a lot of people way back in 2015 when it was announced for the first time that Spider-Man was going to be in the MCU, a lot of people wanted it to be Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker, and everybody said, get Donald Glover to be Miles Morales. Turns out he was in Spider-Man Homecoming, but he played the uncle, Miles Davis, who's supposed to be like the villain uncle to Miles, who's going to come eventually. And the fact that he was in the movie anyway, the Miles Davis character, means that eventually Miles is going to come. So is the uncle's name Miles Davis? I just know that his villain name is the Prowler. Like he was one of the main villains in Into the Spider-Verse. So cool. Getting into No Way Home, this picks up right where Far From Home left off. Did you guys both see Spider-Man Far From Home?
Yeah.
Okay. So you remember how that movie ended right when J. Jonah Jameson, played by the same exact actor from the OG trilogy, right? Named J.K. Simmons. Same exact actor who reveals, thanks to some doctored footage from Mysterio, that Spider-Man's real name is Peter Parker. That's how Far From Home ends, and that's how this movie picks up. Now, one of the biggest criticisms I've heard about this movie is the plot holes. Now, one quote-unquote plot hole that sticks to my mind a lot, which isn't really picked up that much in this movie, except for one line, is the fact that Nick Fury is nowhere to be found. Like, we find out at the very end, the very, very end of Far From Home, that Nick Fury was never there. It was just a scroll pretending to be him, and then Nick Fury is like off-world on some vacation or something. And I thought that was like just a bad joke, like just a fake out, but they kind of made it relevant here. If you guys remember in the police precinct scene, when Peter Parker is arrested, he said, just call Nick Fury. And the Department of Damage Control says, Nick Fury's been off-world for the past year or so. And it's like, what? They made it relevant for that one line, but then they never really pick up on it after that. And that makes me wonder a few things. So the thing that kind of kicks off the plot of this movie is the spell that Peter goes to Doctor Strange for help for and says, can you make the world forget that I'm Spider-Man? And he starts off the spell by saying the entire world is about to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. When he says the entire world, does he just mean the planet Earth, or does he mean the entire universe? Because if he just means the entire world, that means anybody who's not, like anybody who's off-world, the spell wouldn't have no effect on them. So whenever Nick Fury does come back, and he comes back to see that Peter Parker doesn't even exist, because that's how the movie ends, is that what they were going for? Or do you guys think it was like the entire universe, everybody in the universe forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man?
Shit, if he said the world, then it's got to be just the world. But honestly, I didn't even think about that. So I'm glad you said it.
I think it's going to be interesting how it plays out, because in the next movies we're going to start finding out more and more. Like Captain Marvel, I guess, would be a good person who should know who Spider-Man is, and she's not on the planet. So if she remembers, then we kind of get our answer, right? Nick Fury being off the planet, I think, is a setup for that too. If he remembers who Spider-Man is, because he's like setting up some interstellar base or something, right? If he remembers, then that'll be interesting. But that being said, I have like two parts about that spell. But the apparently, so my gripe with that spell was like, that spell is so powerful, like, why wasn't that spell ever used? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could have used that spell so many times in the past. Like, you could have like, imagine everyone forgot who Thanos was before he came. Thanos would be like, wait, hello guys, team, like, you know what I mean? Like, that spell is so useful. And then you got to think, it's like he walked down to his man cave, he just threw some shit up, and he did it, right? There was no consequence. There's nothing he had to set up. No, like 7 days, like the stars have to align. It, like, you're telling me this spell is that accessible? That was like, I was like, huh? And then going to the like what's being erased, it's like my version of the plot hole there is like, even if you forget who Spider-Man is, the problem isn't that like people know who Spider-Man is. The problem was what you mentioned at the beginning of the last, or at the end of the last movie, where there's a viral video of some dude saying Spider-Man is Peter Parker with a picture. You know what I mean? Like, if that spell doesn't remove that video, then that video is still there. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of odd that like, oh yeah, I mind wiped everyone, but then there's this video that I just can watch. It was posted up yesterday, and you know what I mean? And so I talked about that, and someone said in my comments that the spell in the comics is supposed to erase everything in the universe, even technology. And so to the point where like, if you saw something, it would like make it feel like you wouldn't believe it. It was like that overwhelming. And I was just like, they didn't explain any of that in the spell. And so like, that powerful of a spell being used the way it was, I was like, it felt like a plot hole, but it was also like, all right, it's a Spider-Man movie. It's fine. It's fine. Like, well, maybe we'll talk about this in the Doctor Strange movie. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm hoping for.
So good we can give him a pass.
Yeah.
This movie kind of gets a lot of passes, right? Like, it kind of is riddled with plot holes, but it's Spider-Man. it's a lot of it has become a lot of people's favorite Spider-Man movies, right? Because of all the nostalgia they've added to it and whatnot. And we're going to be talking about Doctor Strange quite a bit here because he's one of the main characters in this movie, and he had his movie's next, right? Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But fun fact, or not really a fun fact, but just a matter of fact, his movie was supposed to come before Spider-Man No Way Home. Like Disney kind of shuffled around their release schedule. I think the pandemic had something to do with it, but it also had to do with negotiations between Sony and Disney breaking down in 2019. I don't know if you guys remember, but Sony and Disney were breaking up after Far From Home because, like, you know, the contract was for 5 movies originally: Captain America: Civil War, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Avengers: Infinity War, Avengers: Endgame, and Far From Home. That was the 5-movie deal. And after that, like, it was technically over. And because they weren't agreeing, Spider-Man 3 was going to be just a Sony Marvel movie, not a Disney Marvel like collaboration. But everybody hated that idea, so they came back together and they came up with a new agreement. And I feel like because of that disagreement and new deal, as well as COVID, like the schedule kind of changed, and now Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is chronologically coming after the events of No Way Home. But yeah, the amount of power that goes into that spell, it doesn't really make sense how Strange was so nonchalant about it. The only time they really talked about it was Wong telling Strange, don't cast that spell, it's too dangerous. And Strange said something like, didn't we just do it the other night when we were partying? And he's like, no, I don't remember. And he's like, exactly, because I made you forget, right? And that's it. It was just a one-liner comic, like it was supposed to be like a comedic line about how Strange can just do this. He can just pull it off, right? But look what happened because of how wrong it went, right? Like that's the point of the whole movie. Like the spell went wrong and the whole movie happens because of it, because of Peter. I think this whole movie is kind of Peter's fault, but that's where the great power, with great power comes great responsibility line kicks in. And I'll explain what I mean like toward the end as we continue to talk about Doctor Strange. But yeah, as that spell, you know, messes everything up, it fucks everything up. And then according to Doctor Strange, because of that, villains from other universes or people from other universes who knows Spider-Man's identity shows up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So before I get into like the whole villain aspect of this movie, I also have to ask, because it's kind of relevant, have you guys seen Loki on Disney Plus?
Yep.
Okay, Rams, have you seen it?
Some of it, but I don't think I finished it. No.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, as long as you kind of grasp the concept of variance, that's what I wanted to get into here. Because before this movie came out, Alfred Molina, I think, was cast as Dr. Octopus way back in like 2019, actually. And back then, the only other time something like that happened was when J.K. Simmons popped up as a surprise cameo at the end of Far From Home. But that was clearly a different version of the character, not the same Jameson, right? So when Alfred Molina was cast as Dr. Octopus, when that was announced, some people were saying, oh, it's the same actor, but it's a different version of the character. It can't be the same character. But as more time was passing and rumors started popping up of like, you know, Tobey Maguire showing up and Andrew Garfield showing up and also Jamie Foxx being confirmed to also return, then the conversation started popping up as like, is this going to be a Spider-Verse movie? Will this be a multiverse movie? And eventually there was that interview with Alfred Molina where he was basically saying this is the same exact character from Spider-Man 2. And the question I have to pose to you guys is this the same exact Dr. Octopus from the movie we saw, Spider-Man 2? Or is it from like a parallel universe where Dr. Octopus was not drowning in the river, like he was pulled away? Because he said the last thing he remembered doing was choking Spider-Man with his mechanical arm. That's the last thing he remembers doing. The way I interpret it is that like it is the exact same Dr. Octopus, and he was about to drown. So you know, he was probably losing his senses, and the last thing he remembers is choking Spider-Man. That's the way I took it. But do you guys think it is that same Dr. Octopus, or it's a variant Dr. Octopus from a parallel universe from the Raimi Spider-Man universe series where, you know, Dr. Octopus is pulled away from that exact moment where he's choking Spider-Man? Does that question make sense? Like that was a lot.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Okay, so who do you think it is? Do you think it's the same Doc Ock or variant Doc Ock?
So this is like a theory like I thought about it when I watched the movie, because I remember movies really like any visual content, it just stays. But I also made an effort because way before, like I don't pay attention to spoilers and leaks like that, but like I told my wife, like we have to watch all the Spider-Man, original Spider-Man beforehand, because I just like had a feeling that like there would be some relevance whether they came back or whatever, right?
Right feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like when I was watching it, I was like, no way this is what they do. Because in that scene when they talk about when they die, I remembered the end scenes of all the movies, and they're in every single one. I'm pretty sure in every single one, at the very end, there's like a moment of clarity for all of the people. So for Dr. Octopus, for example, he's choking him, and it shows Tobey Maguire like convincing him, like he's choking. He can't really say much. He's just like, please, or whatever. And then Dr. something clicks, and then he just stops. And then he's the one who he's like, I will stop the sun. I will drown the sun and fix everything. So how does that line up? In No Way Home, everyone's fixed. He can control his tentacles. He is now a good person on Spider-Man's side. So it's like in the movie, you don't really like in Spider-Man 2, when it happens, you don't really like question. You're just like, oh, he had like an epiphany or whatever. But when you tie it back to No Way Home, it's like, wait a second, that moment of clarity wasn't random. That was him being sent back. And so then you go to Green Goblin, when William Dafoe, when he was right about to get stabbed, you can see like a change in his countenance, and like it is very like he was like, oh fuck, like that's literally what he said. And then it's a very big change. And that would make sense given what happened at the end of No Way Home, where he's like this monster and then he gets fixed, and then that fixed person gets back, and then he's put into the same position where he's about to get stabbed, right? And same thing with the lizard. Andrew Garfield was falling off the building, and he had just injected him with the antidote, which when you think about what happens at the end of No Way Home, he gets injected with the antidote, and then Andrew Garfield is falling off the building, and who catches him? The lizard. He catches him, and you're just like, wait, why would he catch him? But then you think about No Way Home, and it's like he had the whole epiphany. And I think like Electro also, I forget the end of that one, because that the main thing that sticks in my head is which girl is it? Is it Gwen Stacy? Gwen Stacy.
The one who died.
Yeah. That at the end of the movie, that's kind of what's in front of my head. Yeah. So like to me, the villains are the exact same ones, and I don't know how they managed to script it, but like considering what's his face, the main Marvel director,
Kevin Feige.
Yeah, he's been involved in like every single Spider-Man thing, even this like Andrew Garfield ones. He was involved in those. So like, are they just geniuses that they're planning this far out? Like, I don't know. Is like, were they just waiting for the moment? Like, that's some next level chess moves by these directors for sure. But the fact that it does feel like it fits, is just wild to me. So yeah, that's my put in.
It's definitely a very interesting theory. The whole moment of clarity thing, I have a couple of things, I guess, to say along the lines of that, though, is that like, number one, for this movie, No Way Home, we physically see them going back, like they get zapped back into their universes, right? So one can only assume that they were zapped into it, right? So in their individual movies, they're still there. Like the theory that you're proposing is that their consciousness leaves and then comes back, right? I guess, sort of.
Well, it'd be kind of like, in Avengers, how like they took the time stones, and they pulled them out of the universe, but their plan was to bring it back to the exact same moment, so as if it was never gone. So that's kind of like how I assumed Doctor Strange's spell would work, where he picked them out of their universe and put them right back in where they were, so that there wouldn't be like a discontinuation of the whatever situation.
This would also mean, though, that all of these Spider-Man villains are still doomed to die, which is what they do, right? Green Goblin gets stabbed to death as soon as he gets healed, he dies, and he remembers. He says, "Don't tell Harry." His last words were, "Don't tell Harry." And Dr. Octopus still drowns. However, the Sandman, if you remember Spider-Man 3, he wasn't stuck in a permanent sand form. He could shapeshift into sand and human form whenever he wanted to. But in No Way Home, it looked like he was stuck as a sand person. I didn't really understand that. Also, he never died at the end of Spider-Man 3. He was never on the brink of death at the end of Spider-Man 3, as far as I can remember. He ended that movie on good terms with Peter Parker. So
Yeah, which when you think about No Way Home, so that one's a little interesting because does he mention in the movie like when he was picked up? I don't remember exactly.
no, I don't think he does. But he when he first shows up, he shows familiarity with being friends with Spider-Man.
Yeah. So to me, it's kind of like, before the fight with Venom in Spider-Man 3, like what changed his mind? What brought him to the point of helping Spider-Man? You know what I mean? It's one of those things where like you could kind of fit Sandman anywhere in that like time period, and it would kind of make sense where like the part of him just wanting to go home to his daughter, right? Like all of those things are still relevant no matter what part, because like at the end he just like walks away, right? Like the end of Spider-Man 3, you kind of just like, peace, I'm getting back to my daughter, right? So
Yeah.
this like I haven't personally looked into the other things, but when I was watching it and then the movies I remembered, I was like, wait a second, this is wild. Like if this is a thing. And then you gotta think about it. Sam Raimi is the director of the next Doctor Strange movie.
Yes. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah. He's
So
directing Multiverse of Madness. Yeah.
yeah, and I think your point, because like when at the end, not the end, throughout the movie, when I was like after that scene in the thing when they talked about the how they died and then them getting sent back, I was just thinking like the whole time, like, wait, like even if he fixes them and then he sends, because he wants to fix them then send them back, I was thinking like they would still die, right? Like if you send them back to the same moment, that just because they're good people now doesn't mean that they're not going to die from whatever situations that they just talked about. Like my dude, the octopus, has the fucking sun and is drowning. Like how do you don't just come back as a good person like, all right, I'm just going to not die from the sun, So that was one thing I was watching. It was like, I get what Tom Holland's doing, but I don't think he understands where they came from because they're still dying. So yeah.
The only scenario that I can think of where it would still make sense to help them out, I don't know if you guys have seen Lucifer. It's a Netflix show. It's about the devil, and then one of the concepts is when you die, if you have guilt, then you get stuck in a hell loop. But if you're guilt free, then you go to a place in heaven where pretty much you live freely. So by helping them recover and get their conscience clean, that could help them move on in the afterlife type concept.
It's crazy you mentioned that because that sounds so removed from the Marvel universe, but like
Yeah.
I have this theory that won't be like the whole hell and like heaven thing. That might be relevant given the track that Marvel's going with these movies, like the kind of setup they're having.
Yeah.
It's crazy what they're gonna do. They like my thought is that they're gonna bring in the God of Light and God of Darkness, and that's kind of crazy, but that's where those things would kind of click together.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think to go along with what both of you guys are saying, you know how the first three phases, like the main theme of them was, they call it the Infinity Saga, and the main theme was like the Infinity Stones and getting all of them and whatnot. I think the main theme, I've said this before in previous episodes of this podcast, I think that the main theme of either this phase or maybe this whole saga, the next few phases, is going to be the multiverse. Not that every single movie from this phase so far has to do with the multiverse. I saw Shang-Chi, which was really, really good. I saw Black Widow, which was also pretty good. Neither one of those movies had much to do with the multiverse, but Spider-Man does. WandaVision and Loki, which are not movies, but they are part of Phase 4, and they really dabbled in multiverse as well. So I think one of the main themes of Phase 4 and the MCU going forward for now is going to be the multiverse. We were also talking earlier in the podcast of like what's to come in this year. Obviously, what's next is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Miss Marvel's is coming up. But I think the next movie that's coming out after Doctor Strange 2 is Thor Love and Thunder, which is going to be Thor Part 4. We were also talking earlier in this podcast about like that spell that Doctor Strange was casting on the world. how are we supposed to know if it's affecting just planet Earth or the entire universe? I think Thor: Love and Thunder, depending on when it takes place, will also be a good indication of that. Like we'll see, because Thor is off somewhere with the Guardians of the Galaxy, right? According to the end of Avengers Endgame. That movie should also kind of indicate whether they all remember who Peter Parker is and who Spider-Man is. Although I don't remember Thor interacting much with Spider-Man in Endgame. Peter Quill did, Star-Lord did. That's another Peter character, right? But I don't think Thor did. Anyway, I digress. We'll see how that goes. We'll see what happens.
Wait, just a point on there. Do you think, because like I was making this pun, because there's the next Guardians of the Galaxy, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, right? And so Thor's technically with them. And so like it'd be funny if they named the movie as Guardians of the
as Guardians.
Yeah. But do you think that the next Thor movie is gonna be, because I thought that they're gonna give the mantle over to the doctor girlfriend girl,
Jane Foster.
Yeah, so isn't, I feel like she's, since Thor's gone, and it probably, like, he already gave the mantle of like being like the king of Asgard over to the Valkyrie. I gotta remember the names. That it's rude of me to not know their names, because there should be
that is her name, Valkyrie. I think that's her name.
Oh, is that her real name? I thought that was like her class of warrior. I thought they were Valkyries.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. I can't remember either, but Tessa Thompson plays her. I'm pretty sure that's the actress's name.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but like the Thor movie might be around those two characters, because they got the new mantle of what Thor passes on, because he doesn't want to be Thor anymore. And there was a whole argument about that. Like, is Thor a title, or is that his name? And it is his name, but it's also a title, like the protector of whatever. So I don't know exactly what to expect with that movie. I haven't looked at it.
That's a good point. I mean, I have been hearing rumors that Jane Foster is supposed to become the new Thor, not just the new God of Thunder, but the new Thor, like the title with that name. I don't know. Does that mean that Mjolnir is coming back too? I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what they're gonna do with that, to be honest. Yeah, that's as far as 2022 goes with the slate of Marvel movies. I think that's what's coming next. I mean, as far as Marvel movies go, the next one is going to be Morbius, which I don't know if you guys are that excited about it. I liked Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I thought that was an okay movie. It was better than Eternals, in my opinion. So
I gotta watch Venom.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it's also relevant to this movie. We're talking about Spider-Man: No Way Home. So Morbius is next. And the trailer for Morbius also threw everybody for a loop, because Michael Keaton was in the trailer, and Michael Keaton, as far as Spider-Man goes, is famous for portraying Vulture in Spider-Man: Homecoming. So he was in that trailer, and people are like, what universe is this taking place in? Once the movie comes out, I feel like there's going to be a lot more clarity on it. The Venom cameos is something else that we really need to touch base on this movie, other than the very notorious supporting characters of Peter 2, Peter 3. The cameos that I want to get into first before that, Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox. I've said before on this podcast that Netflix's Daredevil, which is not even on Netflix anymore, or soon to be taken off of Netflix, was one of my favorite Netflix original shows. Have you guys seen any of the Netflix Marvel shows, like Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, which I really didn't like, and The Defenders, which I really didn't like, and The Punisher, which I haven't seen? Have you guys seen any of those shows?
No.
I started Luke Cage, but I didn't finish it.
I liked Luke Cage season 1. I thought season 1 was pretty good, at least like the first half of season 1. But Mahershala Ali, who's in that now, he's going to portray Blade in the upcoming Marvel slate. He was in Eternals in the post-credit scene, not on screen, but just his voice. Parvision, you haven't seen Daredevil on Netflix, but I'm sure you've heard like what was going on with that cameo, right? Right at the beginning with Matt Murdock. Have you heard, like, that was the same actor who was in Netflix's Daredevil? Okay.
Yeah, I knew, like, when I was like, I know the character. So then when I saw that, I was like, wait a second. Is this from the Netflix thing? But like, I didn't know. And then afterwards I was like, oh, it was,
Yeah. So I guess a lot of people might not have seen it because they're not on Disney Plus, even though they're way older than the Disney Plus shows. Daredevil came out for season 1 in 2015. And then more recently, at the end of last year, there was a Disney Plus show called Hawkeye, which we also reviewed on this podcast. And the Kingpin, who was also in Daredevil, was there. So once these actors started showing up, the conversation about, like, are the Netflix MCU shows canon started all over again. They were supposed to be canon because when Disney got the rights back to Daredevil, they decided instead of making a movie, let's do a TV show of it. And since Disney Plus didn't exist at the time, that's how the Netflix deal was born. But my theater, the one that I went to, was really, really hyped when Charlie Cox showed up, because that was the beginning. That was the first 10 minutes. That was way before Peter 2 and Peter 3 showed up. So I was happy to see him and to see like the hype behind it. That made me feel really, really good too. The next cameo that I wanted to ask about, which is a mid-credit scene, Eddie Brock, Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock / Venom. Realms, have you seen either of the Venom movies or not?
I've seen
No,
the first
not yet.
Okay, so Parvision, you've seen the first one. Okay, so you know.
I also saw the
yeah.
end part of Venom, the credit scene. I knew to watch that. So
Okay, cool. So you guys are at least familiar with the character, right? Like Tom Hardy as this character. Both of you guys are familiar. So one thing that I thought was going to happen at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage, when we see them enter the MCU as, I guess, part of Doctor Strange's spell, right? That's how he ends up there. But then in the mid-credit scene of this movie, No Way Home, he gets zapped back to his universe, but he leaves behind a bit of the Venom symbiote. That was a little bit disappointing to me, only because I was hoping that Venom 3 was going to be titled Maximum Carnage, and it was going to be this Eddie Brock plus Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like the symbiote would somehow leave Eddie Brock, would attach to Tom Holland, Peter Parker. He would have his whole emo phase. They would split. It would get back together with Eddie Brock. He would get the white spider on his chest to finally have the Spider-Man powers. And they would team up to battle another Cletus Cassidy Carnage from the MCU. Like this would be played by a different actor, because it would be a different Cletus Cassidy Carnage. And the movie would be titled Maximum Carnage. But since Eddie Brock has now been zapped back to his universe, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I mean, some of the symbiote has been left behind, but I really can't tell what they're doing. Venom has always been my favorite Spider-Man villain, so it's getting kind of confusing now. It made sense at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage with him being in the MCU, but he leaves before any action takes place. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard, but one of the early drafts of No Way Home was supposed to have Venom as part of the villain lineup that the 3 Spider-Man face. Like it would have been like a makeshift Sinister Six at this point, because it was only 5 villains. But that also doesn't happen. So now I'm like, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do with the Venom character? I don't know. Maybe we'll know more when Morbius comes out. But
I think that's where it's a good part to bring in the theory thing. That like, because I was thinking the same thing. I love Venom. Venom's like the dopest. It's just so cool whenever Venom shows up. Like it doesn't even matter that the movies are kind of like not the best, like, you know what I mean? But I'm not gonna say trash. I actually like the first one, but obviously, you know, there's things about it that weren't like top tier, right? But and so this movie, they did a really good job of like subtly hinting. In No Way Home, they did a really good job of subtly hinting at this like emphasis point. And it's this crazy thing, because I made my video and I was just thinking like, maybe they mention it, but no, apparently, and I have to double check it, but Sony confirmed this movie afterwards, and I was like, no way. So the thing is, it's like the whole, sorry, move my mic, but the whole multiversal connection, right? And this goes back to the problem with the spell. So a way I kind of rationalized it too was that Spider-Man himself is way beyond just the kid getting bitten by a spider. Like in the comics and in like the lore of it, there's way more beyond that. And the reason why is the Spidey sense. So that Spidey sense is tied to this thing called the web of reality. And the web of reality is a multiversal connection to this person called Madam Web. So she's the core spider. And I think Sony confirmed her movie. And and this was after I made the theory that like this is why they emphasize this thing. So the scene that really emphasized that Spidey sense thing was when Doctor Strange pushed Peter out of his body, and then you see Peter's body go into autopilot mode. That existence right there is like a super high tier level of that thing that shouldn't really normally be possible. I feel like if they had shown like Toby or Andrew Garfield in the same thing, if you the way you kind of tier up how strong a spider person is that spidey sense connection, and that spidey sense connection is like the ability of foresight. So they never really explain that in any of the movies. They just say like, oh, they have spidey sense, they have a spidey tingle, and they kept on emphasizing a spidey tingle. And then so I was just like, they're just never going to explain it? No, I'm pretty sure they will, because of the web of reality. And now what Sony's probably going to do is Andrew Garfield has a way to revive his franchise, because like in this movie they were like, he just went rogue, he went blah blah blah, and then this movie is kind of like the redemption for him too, to become like Spider-Man again, like a true Spider-Man. So he's going to go back to the Sony verse, and he's going to be with the Tom Hardy Venom, so that's why they have to bring him back. But the and so the spell part was that Doctor Strange probably never realized Spider-Man's multiversal connection when he did the spell. Had he done that spell on any other person who wasn't like, I wouldn't say Spider-Man's a Nexus being, but his connection to the multiverse kind of makes him a Nexus person. Whereas like if Doctor Strange did that spell to Wanda, for example, it would work way different because she's a Nexus being. And so Doctor Strange's lack of preparation for the spell and lack of knowledge of who Peter Parker really is, I think that's what made that spell go wonky. And that's something that I think that's what I was kind of like saying earlier, that I think in the Doctor Strange movie they might explain that, like, oh, there's like a web of reality. And the other part of it is that that's a multiversal connection. But I also said in this movie, in No Way Home, there's like 5 multiverse connections. And the other one is Venom. Venom itself is a multiverse entity because of the hive mind. Like everyone forgot who Spider-Man is, but that Venom from the other verse is connected to the hive mind. He won't forget who Spider-Man is. There's no way, because there's so many backups. And so he's gonna attach to somebody in Spider-Man's verse, and he's gonna know who Tom Holland is. And the setup for this is and you were asking like, what are they gonna do with Venom? There's a storyline with Shang-Chi and Spider-Man called Spider-Man Island. And they also have the setup for this. I forgot who it is, but somebody wants to recreate Spider-Man, and it's in Manhattan, and pretty much they release like a Spider-Man thing, and all of Manhattan is consumed by the Spider-Man thing. And because of all these spider people, Spider-Man loses his Spidey sense, because it becomes weaker, because there's so many connections now made to this verse, where normally there's only like 1 or 2, or like you said, Miles Morales is probably in this verse, right? So what ends up happening is Shang-Chi trains Spider-Man to learn how to fight without a Spidey sense and uses spider abilities, and it's like the way of the spider. And so that's how Shang-Chi and Spider-Man connect. And then they end up taking on Spider Island, and the way it's solved is actually Venom, because the Venom, they like synthesize an anti-venom that counters the Spider-Man ability. And that's something I want to see explained, because they talk about this in Eternals, how deviants are like, the point of deviants were to be like continuous evolution of things, right? Whereas the Eternals are like, they're stagnant. They're like these perfectly strong beings that stay the same, whereas the deviants continue to evolve, and they went out of control. And so that parallel is the same kind of parallel with Spider-Man and Venom. Like when you think about the symbiotes, and this is where the Lucifer reference that you talked about, they're probably going to bring Null, the god of darkness, into the Spider-Verse, and they've already kind of introduced him, because remember in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, the Nowhere, the headless celestial?
Yeah, I remember.
Who's the person who killed that celestial? Do you know?
Was it Null?
It was Null.
Oh,
He's the guy who killed that celestial, and they emphasize that point, like, oh, he's a guy who got killed randomly, blah blah, right? Now at the end of Eternals, and I was like, because they announced this, the Black Knight, the guy from, I always forget the actor's names. I'm really bad.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Kid Harington.
Yeah, yes. So the Black Knight is really huge, because his sword is I think it's called the Ebony Blade, and it's very similar to the sword that God Null uses. And there's a storyline where, because that sword is there, and God Null, because of some situation, I don't remember all the comics, I think they did it a few different ways, he's in search of his sword is like missing, and so he goes and he sees the Black Knight sword, and he uses it, and he realizes something is wrong, but then he ends up finding his sword or something like that. And so I thought that was a really interesting connection that they inserted the Black Knight like that in Eternals, and then their setup of having to find the Celestials and all that stuff. And then the counter to God Null is the quantum verse, the quantum universe. And for me, before Phase 4 came out, I thought that Ant-Man, he was going to become the next like Iron Man character, because the quantum universe is so powerful. Like that was the solution for Phase 3. They went back in time through the quantum verse. They did so many things through the quantum verse. And there's the microverse that is probably going to be explored in the next Ant-Man movie. And in that realm, there's like these I forgot what they're called, the emissaries of light. And so in Loki, they talked about how there was like a multiversal war that made all the timelines branch off and all that stuff. A huge part of that was the war between the emissaries of light and God Null, the light and darkness. And the rationalization is that there's like, that's like hell and, you know, all that stuff. And it's really like, that's where like, I'm just like so mind blown about all the different moving parts that they're introducing, because like they're just kind of shotgunning it out. And like every time I have a thought, like, no way they're gonna do this, but then they put in like a thing and it's like a significant part. And then I thought I was crazy, but then Sony puts out the Madam Web movie, and I'm like, they're doing the web of reality then, you know? And then in going back to the Spider-Verse, that's a Sony thing, right? They very in your face showed the web of reality when they brought everybody together. They used the imagery that they use in the comics for the web of reality. So that's just another thing. And I don't know if you guys can handle all that crazy, like top tier, like God, dark, light, multiverse, web of reality, hive mind, but I feel like it's coming. It's going to be wild. I just hope they have better setup than Eternals, because they kind of like, they put way too much in one movie, and that was kind of the problem. And that's kind of, I'm explaining all of this way too much stuff, and that could easily become overwhelming.
I think it would have been better as a series instead of a movie. It's way too much going on with like a pacing for a film. Anyway, there have been MCU movies as long as it was, like 2.5, 3 hours long, but not with those horrible pacing problems. Whatever they were doing there, like they already had so many Disney Plus shows already. WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye. They could have just had the Eternals be a series. That's what I think.
I think that to me tells me that they're putting less emphasis on the Eternals, but there are elements that the Eternals movie brings in that they have to be touched on, right? So like all the things I'm talking about, you have to bring in the Eternals if you're talking about Celestials, right? So, and then the other part that I think is the relevant part is the deviance part. Like if you remember, you were asking like, how does Shang-Chi connect, right? Shang-Chi connects because the thing that was behind the gate was a deviant, essentially.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, it's basically a deviant. And the 10 rings, I don't know if it clicked, but the Eternals are basically, that's a tool, probably from another Eternal, like another faction of Eternals. And there's a few storylines for that to make sense. But yeah, I think the Eternal, I don't know if you saw because it released on Disney Plus, they showed what scenes were cut out of the movie. And one of them was like, why did they cut this out of the movie? That would have made the movie so much better. They had a scene where Sprite, she tells Jon Snow, the Black Knight, she tells him, like teases him the whole story of the Eternals, like going through a museum and talking to him about like, this is what the Eternals did, this is blah blah blah. I'm like, this was such an important clip. Like this is how you know the movie was so rushed. Not rushed, but like forced. Forced is the better word. Not rushed, is forced. And they just wanted big name people to like advertise for it, and that's why they couldn't make it a series. But I agree with you, they should have made it a series rather than a movie.
Just because they used big name actors and actresses, Angelina Jolie, legendary actors, just because they used these actors doesn't mean it couldn't have been a series. But yeah, they probably cut that scene out only because the movie would have become bloated in like however they were trying to like portray their story. So however they were trying to film it, however they were trying to delineate the story that they were telling. So, but I agree, certain things could have made that movie better. to me, the worst thing about that movie was the pacing, not like the story they were trying to tell behind it. It could have been a more enjoyable movie if they were telling it the right way. They didn't have to, like, it's rushed in the sense that they're trying to tell a coherent story in a 2.5 hour movie. And something like that, like the Eternals, which has not really any backstory. Guardians of the Galaxy back in 2014 was also kind of like a new thing, but that was a good movie. Like they introduced that pretty well, but that was also only like 4 or 5 characters. There are a lot of Eternals, and the Eternal characters, like the concept of Eternals, needs a lot of backstory. Guardians of the Galaxy didn't really,
Yeah.
but I digress. I also heard about Madam Web. In fact, early on in this podcast, when I was telling you guys about how the deal between Sony and Disney broke down, I heard way back when that Spider-Man 3, Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3 was always going to be a Spider-Verse movie. It was going to involve the other Spider-Men. It was going to have generally the same plot, except that they would have substituted Doctor Strange's role with Madam Web's role. Like Madam Web would have taken the place of Doctor Strange if Marvel Studios would not have been involved. But thankfully they did still get together, and that happened. There's still going to be a Madam Web movie. And with the whole thing with what you were saying about how Peter Parker being pushed into the astral plane, yet his spider sense was still being activated. When I first saw that happening, like I felt a certain way about it. Like after that, it was just a whole fight scene between Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, right? And this is how I felt about it. And Parvision, you're going to be the only one who understands this. I feel like Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, that's how it felt to me. Okay, like he won the fight, and this is his movie, right? But like, I didn't really like that he didn't. Maybe Doctor Strange underestimated him, right? Like he didn't really understand how powerful, how smart, like how much of a genius Peter Parker really was. But this ties back into the moral of the story, which was this is basically kind of like a full circle of the origin story for this Peter Parker in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is Aunt May dying, and her dying words being, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility." This is how I interpret what she meant with this, or not, or what Peter should have taken from this, which is, in this case, the great power, in this particular case, the great power that Peter Parker has is the power and responsibility of a powerful friend, which is Doctor Strange. Remember, this whole movie happened because he went to Doctor Strange to cast a dangerous spell, which kind of fucks up New York City at the time because of supervillains coming in from other universes. But at the end of the movie, Tom Holland Peter, comes to grips with the mistake he's made, and he takes great responsibility for it by saying to Doctor Strange, "Yeah, if you have to cast a spell to make it like I never existed, do it. This is my responsibility, so I will do it." That's how I interpret it. With great power comes great responsibility, and his great power was the power of a powerful friend, Doctor Strange, and the responsibility he's taking is to fix the problem he started, which is to make the spell so that he never existed in the first place. That's the way I took it anyway. The most coveted thing about this movie was the two other Peter Parkers, Peter 2, Peter 3. I honestly feel like Andrew Garfield got more attention than Tobey Maguire did. Like people praise him a lot more, even though like people were more hyped about Tobey Maguire showing up. But I feel like Andrew Garfield's role and his redemption of saving MJ, that I feel like garnered way more praise than Tobey Maguire showing up. That was still cool, of course. Like we were looking forward to that the most. But now everybody is saying, give us Amazing Spider-Man 3, give us another Spider-Man movie with Andrew Garfield. It's cool if it happens. It's cool if like if Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock is from that universe too, and they reveal it that way. That would be cool too. But they were not in the movie for as long as I thought they were going to be. I also have to admit, I was following rumors and spoilers for this movie for a very, very long time. And I can say that about 50% of them were true, 50% of them were false. Some of the rumors were saying that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were going to be co-leads to Tom Holland. That wasn't really true. They had about 11 minutes of screen time compared to Tom Holland's Peter Parker. So they were supporting characters, but not exactly main characters, the same way this was Tom Holland's movie, right? But I was happy that they were in the movie. If they weren't in the movie, I would have been shocked, because even if you weren't looking for spoilers, you kind of knew that you were hearing about like legacy Spider-Man characters coming back. Parvision, it's also interesting how you explain how the previous MCU movies from Phase 4 also do tie into the multiverse with Shang-Chi and the evil dragon who's basically a deviant. I didn't catch that before, but it makes sense now that you explain it. And the 10 Rings, Wong was in that movie and he wasn't exactly sure what the origin of the 10 Rings were. So I guess, yeah, the multiverse was subtly still involved with Shang-Chi somehow. And I also knew about the whole Way of the Spider fighting style that Shang-Chi actually teaches him. I didn't know that that came with like him losing his Spidey sensibility though, but they also kind of hinted that like the what did you call it? The web of reality or the web?
Yeah, web of reality.
Right. Right. So at the end of No Way Home, we see the universe kind of tearing above the Statue of Liberty, right? I guess what you were describing just now kind of sounds like that. Like everybody who knows who Peter Parker is, them coming through, that kind of seemed like the web of reality right there. But I did hear about Dakota Johnson potentially playing Madam Web, maybe an origin story, because she's kind of young to play Madam Web, I guess. Because I always pictured her as like more of like an elderly, like mentor figure to Spider-Man. That's how I always pictured it. But pictured her. That movie is also coming. There's also Kraven the Hunter coming. There's a whole Sinister Six that Sony is planning. And I think now that they renegotiated, the Sony Marvel movies might have way more involvement than originally planned. And then there's Multiverse of Madness, and there are rumors of the old X-Men characters somehow becoming relevant in this as well. So yeah, we're going to be seeing more and more multiverse, I guess, as we progress with Phase 4.
It's going to be hard to digest, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Probably, yeah. But for the most
part, like everything I said, I didn't even mention the X-Men thing, but that one was just like in your face in the trailer. I was like, that's Dr. X, like that's his seat.
Patrick Stewart, yeah.
And then the whole like that. I don't remember all the trailer, but I remember like really when I saw the Ultron bots, I was like, no. And then the Illuminati setup, I was like, they're doing it. They're like, how crazy are they gonna go? I don't know. And then what you mentioned with the Sony stuff, it's like the way I'm seeing it is like Sony, you know, whether you believe in them or not, like they kind of were trash before Marvel, right? Like they needed the directorship of Kevin Feige to really boost things up in the first place. But I feel like they're, especially with the trailer with Mobius, it feels like they're just like clinging on to like Marvel's like, you know, outputting. And I don't know if they're going to execute on that necessarily. But what I'm feeling like is they're going to have their own multiverse setup. And it might end up being, you know how like back in the day it was like Marvel DC, like I feel like there might be like a Sony Marvel like master collab movie like setup. Like I feel like that's what they're preparing for, where they split up strategically certain characters that Sony has to develop, and then eventually we'll get like a huge like huge franchise, like cross franchise movie. And it just, that's just how it's feeling like that. Because like if you go from an Infinity War, like where you just cross movie all these people, what's the next step? You know, everything's always bigger and better. So it just feels like they're going to do a cross franchise thing eventually. That's what Sony wants really badly, at least from my perspective.
No, I think you're right. And I don't think that was the original plan, but I think they kind of have to do that now, because Spider-Man now is the most successful of a character that he's ever been, ever since he's become a part of the MCU. Even before No Way Home, Far From Home was the first billion-dollar Spider-Man movie. And before that, Spider-Man was part of several billion-dollar movies: Captain America, Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, all billion-dollar movies, including Spider-Man in it, right? So once you go into the MCU, there's no going back. I don't know what Sony was thinking they would still have the same level of success being separate from all these other Marvel characters. That was just not going to happen. I think after having seen how Venom Let There Be Carnage had a scene with that character going into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not the franchise, but the actual literal universe, then we got a hint of like, if Kevin Feige is going to allow that, then there's going to be more integration with the other Sony Marvel movies. So it's definitely exciting to see. It's going to be a lot to digest for the general audience, but for hardcore people like us, we're getting it. We kind of get where they're going. And for the general audience, Marvel has already had a great track record. I mean, sure, Eternals was, I guess, kind of their first flop in a while, but regardless of Eternals, every single movie is still super hyped up. It's back to the old regard with Spider-Man No Way Home, and then Doctor Strange coming up soon. Thor coming up soon. This Marvel hype train is not going to die as far as I can tell. Maybe not until Kevin Feige retires. A lot of this success can be put back on Feige, who has been the executive producer for Marvel Studios for a long time. And even before this, like you said, he has worked on previous Spider-Man movies as a producer. He's worked on the X-Men movies as a producer. He's worked on Marvel for a very, very long time. So with Patrick Stewart's voice in the trailer, there's a lot that they're hiding, a lot that they're going to reveal. I just hope, right? I guess as far as closing statements go for this movie, Tom Holland said he wants to take a break. I saw Uncharted last weekend, which, I played several of the Uncharted games on PS3, 4, and 5. Well, actually, yeah, there aren't any Uncharted games on PS5 except for the remaster, but I played Uncharted a lot. Didn't really like the movie. Regardless of that, Tom Holland kind of carried the movie. I think he's a really good actor. He said he wants to take a break from acting, but I also heard that Marvel Studios and Sony wants to do another whole trilogy of Spider-Man movies. And I don't think they'd want to do it without Tom Holland. So I just hope the dude wants to come back to continue being Peter Parker.
I think they already confirmed that he was on set for filming for Spider-Man 4.
It was confirmed?
I think so. At least that was the rumor. I don't keep up with it, but during the time, because they had to, apparently they started filming it and he was there. And the way I saw it was like, Tom Holland, in terms of like marketing for No Way Home, he did a really good job. A lot of people say he does the spoilers all the time. For me, my perspective of it is that's all purposeful. Like everything was just an act in Guys. And like even more so, like you could tell like between Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland coming into this movie, everything was like on their end, at least. The spoilers weren't their faults, but like in terms of how they did their tour, the press tours, they did a really good job of keeping it under wraps. And I think Tom Holland is just a marketing legend. Like if you heard that this was his last Spider-Man movie, that would hype it up even more, right? Like that's kind of how I saw it. And yeah, and the other thing about the trilogy thing, after No Way Home, I realized, and this is my personal thing, and I feel like a lot of people gave the first two Spider-Man movies in the Marvel universe like a lot of flack for the way it was. And I think coming out of No Way Home, it would have been better named. And obviously they wouldn't do this, but it would have made more sense if those movies were Peter Parker something really, because they're more Peter Parker movies than they were Spider-Man. Now he's Spider-Man. Now, like you said, like after he got the quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Now he made the decision. Now he's Spider-Man. So the next trilogy is a real Spider-Man trilogy, whereas everything before this was just like a coming of age of Peter Parker. And whereas like all the previous trilogies, they took care of that in the first like 30 minutes of the movie, where he's grasping what his powers are, he's grasping what his responsibilities are, and he's given that like catalyst moment of Uncle Ben dying, right? Whereas in hindsight, because I also was like, these Spider-Man movies are fine, whatever. But like every single time he abused Tony Stark's power, every single time he didn't take any responsibility, he abused the power. With Edith, he literally got godly powers and he just handed it off to some random person, right? That's literally great power with no responsibility, right? And so when you think about it, it's like those movies were Peter Parker movies. Those movies were him learning about his power, learning about his responsibility. And No Way Home was the last movie of Peter Parker. And this next movie, and when you think about it too, like the way I see it is that Peter Parker actually died in this movie. Like that's how I see it. Whereas like when you think about it, like Iron Man, Tony Stark, yes, he died, but he didn't actually die. Why? Because like in every single movie afterwards, he's mentioned every single time. Everyone remembers him. Everyone thinks about him. Everyone lives by his thing. Spider-Man lives by what Tony Stark's legacy was. So he didn't actually die. That's not true death, right? Whereas Peter Parker, he's forgotten. That's true death right there. And so now going to the next supposed trilogy, we're going to get like a real Spider-Man start. This is now Spider-Man trilogy, in my eyes, at least.
One of the biggest criticisms of the first two Spider-Man movies of the MCU was that they, like Iron Man Jr., like people say that this is basically too much Iron Man involvement. And I didn't really mind the mentor relationship he had with Tony Stark, but I did still kind of feel like because there was so much Iron Man lore involvement, like Stark Tech and Tony Stark himself, because there was so much, like both of the villains, the Vulture and Mysterio, they were villains associated in some capacity with Tony Stark, which is why I felt like the movies felt like Iron Man spinoffs. But I was okay with the mentor relationship, the whole Iron Man Junior criticism or Iron Boy. I don't subscribe to that, honestly. But I do feel like Peter Parker was very dependent on Stark Tech. All of his suits were made by Stark Tech, but the suit he had at the end of No Way Home, he sewed it himself. There was a little sewing machine in his bedroom or whatever, right? He made that himself. So yeah, he is Spider-Man now, all on his own. No Aunt May, no Tony Stark, no other Spider-Man, just him. And he's officially an adult now too. I think he was in high school for Homecoming and Far From Home, but he was applying to college, right? He didn't get into MIT. That's what kickstarted the movie. So now he's an actual adult. Now he's Spider-Man doing his own thing. With that being said, I hope to see more team ups between him and Daredevil. I hope he cross paths with the Kingpin. I really want to see that come to life as far as the future of the movies go. And it's definitely possible that he was just saying he wants to take a break from acting just to throw people off. That could definitely be it as well. I mean, I can see it going both ways because he's been doing a lot of acting in high profile movies. A lot of the movies that are the biggest movies, Avengers movies and Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland has been in them now. So he's one of the biggest A-list actors, but I hope he does truly come back. Maybe he has, like you said. With all of this being said, I really, really love this movie. Seeing it for the first time was definitely an experience. It was not the first pandemic movie I've seen, but it was the one I was looking forward to the most for years and years, like 2 years on. So I'm going to hold my thoughts for ratings. Do you gentlemen have anything you want to say as far as closing statements go before we go into ratings?
Want to go realms?
Honestly, I feel like I'm in the middle of a Dragon Ball Z episode because I'm in awe with all the Marvel knowledge y'all just dropped. Like I feel like I'm Krillin watching Goku and Frieza like up in the air, like God damn, they going so damn fast. But I loved every moment of it.
Yeah, it's crazy because you said that, and I feel like there's so much more to talk about with this, with like what they showed, like even with the trailer with Doctor Strange and the potential with Spider-Man. Spider-Man has like the most potential out of any character because of the multiverse type of feeling to it. To me, and I this is how I labeled my review of the movie when I first watched it. It was like it was a dream come true, and like the thing there is like, dreams sometimes can be too good to be true, you know what I mean? And so like this right now feels great, and like it's all about what they do next. Like there's so many ways, and it still feels like a fever dream that anything that I just said is even possible, like remotely possible. But like I said, they already the Madam Web, and then in Doctor Strange they have like the Illuminati, and then so that they're gonna bring in like X-Men probably. How are they gonna do that? And then with X-Men there's the mutant gene, and then Spider-Man like relates to that. Then there's there's so many things. It's so crazy. So
y'all don't put me on game. A whole bunch of stuff I didn't know anything about, and now I'm kind of like, I'm hype about this shit.
yeah. This movie was like, it served the purpose I think that I wanted it to, and it like mind blown me in ways that like I didn't expect them to either. So that's pretty much my thing. There's obviously some things that give passes here and there, especially given the history of Marvel, where like sometimes plot holes get fixed, like the whole Loki thing, right? Like in Avengers, like he kind of just comes back in like Thor Ragnarok, and you're like, where was Loki this whole time? And then you watch the Loki series and you're like, oh, that's not a plot hole, or that's not like something that they just kind of like forgot. They were thinking about that, right? So like a lot of people want to just punch down on all the plot holes. I'm just like, trust the process, just trust it,
Regarding the plot holes in this movie, I was willing to forgive a lot of it too. I'm not saying this movie is perfect, because the way you described it was, now that I think about it, what it was for me too, like a dream come true. It was too good to be true. Like I still remember being in the movie theater and watching the Marvel Studios logo come up, and like I was waiting for this movie for so long. It's finally happening. I'm finally about to see what I have been waiting for, what I have been anticipating for such a long time. And it did what I wanted it to do, just like you were describing. So tying back to what I said in the beginning of this podcast, as a Spider-Verse movie, is this like immediately the first movie that comes to mind is Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse, and we saw the teaser for Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, which is the next, which is the sequel to that movie. Is No Way Home better than that one? I don't know, because Spider-Verse was, it was a movie with its own original, Spider-Man characters. This movie is not that. It's not a movie with Spider-Verse movie with original characters. It's legacy characters that they brought back from previous franchises together. It plays a lot into nostalgia, which Avengers Endgame also really did as well. So yeah, but it gets to you, like that nostalgia gets to you, and that kind of adds to like the enjoyment that you get from watching the movie. So going straight into ratings, I'm going to give this the same that I gave Spider-Verse back 2 years ago when I reviewed it. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10 because it's not perfect. I gave Endgame a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to have to hold back just a little bit for this. And I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I've only seen it that one time in theaters, but I pre-ordered the 4K Blu-ray and I'm going to watch that over and over again once I finally get it. So that's what it is for me. What about y'all?
I gave it my reaction, I think, still is the same as like it's a 9 out of 10 for me. And like a lot of the things that they speak positively about it, like, one of the problems, like Suicide Squad, like they did so many things and they had to introduce like the first hour, the original Suicide Squad, they spent the first hour introducing all these characters. And honestly, I liked the first hour, and the second hour was not great. But like in this movie, a lot of people were comparing that, like, this is how you introduce villains, this is how you do all that. And I was just saying there, like, these villains were introduced decades ago. Like that's not fair comparison. Like they didn't do anything in this movie to do anything spectacular about that, right? They built off of something that's built off years ago, and whether that's good or bad, that and then the other part of it, like especially with Marvel movies, and like people may disagree with me, but for me, it's very hard that a movie is a 10 out of 10 because none of the movies are standalones. And like, for me, like when like you're left waiting for like another thing in like on this movie, we're waiting for how many other movies, how many other series, you know what I mean? Like it kind of takes away from it. So from like a cinematic experience, it's not like a 10 out of 10, but obviously like I'd say like Black Panther like is still like one of my, like, probably the top movie in terms of like solo superhero feeling. And like Spider-Man didn't exactly beat Black Panther in my mind, but like Black Panther, for example, the soundtrack, I came out of the movie Wakanda Forever, everybody, it didn't matter who you were, if you weren't doing that, like you just didn't watch the same movie as me, you know what I mean? Like Spider-Man No Way Home, sure, it got that like hype, you got that, but you weren't like a community, you know what I mean? Like you weren't running around like vibing with Black Panther. I don't know, it's like, so like that movie just like as a standalone from beginning end, yeah, there were some things here and there you can disagree about, like Killmonger's role in there, but I feel like No Way Home is definitely like a 9 out of 10 for me, for sure. There's room for a little bit higher end some movies.
We reviewed Black Panther on this podcast as well. I would put Homecoming and Far From Home way below Black Panther, but I personally would still put No Way Home above the Black Panther movie. Right. That's just me though. Like as far as
and to that point, how many different things that they'll pull out for this movie? You know what I mean? Yeah. You take out the nostalgia, you take out Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Daredevil, William Dafoe, like you take out all these things that make this movie like they relied on all this setup, right? Black Panther was all on its own, pretty much. Yeah. So like when you take that into consideration, that's why I'm like, they relied on a lot of other things that, I'm not shitting on them for. I'm just saying, like, as the movie on its own, you know what I mean? So
that's what the movie was. It was a multiverse movie from legacy Spider-Man franchises. That's exactly what the movie was.
Yeah. It's enjoyable though. I loved it. I hope, this is the crazier part. They said that No Way Home was the appetizers for Doctor Strange Marvel Madness in terms of cameo, in terms of bringing people back. So then it's like Fantastic Four, X-Men, like I don't even know. And then people are thinking Ultimate Iron Man, was it? No.
Superior Iron Man.
Superior Iron Man. Yeah. And oh, here's another connection, just throwing out there. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, at the end of it, I don't know if you guys remember this, Adam Warlock was at the very end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the golden like princess planet
Oh,
people.
them.
Adam Warlock
Yeah.
is a creation from the Illuminati.
Okay. Yeah. I think Superior Iron Man is an Illuminati member, actually. And maybe
Yeah, like,
Rex is too.
yeah, so there's another time, like it's
Oh
crazy.
my God.
It's crazy.
May can't come soon enough. Yeah, the appetizer for Multiverse of Madness. Yeah. That's maybe, you know what else I have been thinking? We gotta let Rums do his rating, but before, like, one last thing. Sorry, Rums.
Take your time, I'm good.
So there have been several movies for Phase 4, TV shows too for Phase 4, right? Most phases of the MCU ends with like a massive crossover film like the Avengers. I don't know if it's going to be that for Phase 4. Maybe Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is the main event of Phase 4. Maybe. I mean, there is Thor: Love and Thunder that comes after this, but maybe they'll just make that a Phase 5 film, and Multiverse of Madness is the main event. I don't know. I feel like it should be because of everything that we've seen so far and everything going into it. But maybe there's going to be a little bit more before we get there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I couldn't tell you. It's the way I'm seeing it also is like we don't even know how interactive if it's surrounded on Doctor Strange doing something like in the What If where he destroys like a universe and he has to find a universe or whatever, like, but like, or maybe this is the way they introduce all of these things that end up circling back at the end and everybody comes back together. So it's like Doctor Strange interacts with all of these different elements in all of these different universes. And then, you know, as the phases goes on, we get like updates or movies or whatever that makes these characters relevant. And then we have the crossover at the end. So they like I said, I'm just trusting the process at this point. I told all of my friends going into Shang-Chi that like don't have high expectations for Shang-Chi and Eternals. It's gonna be like they're doing way too much. And I told them that the way you gauge the rest of Marvel, at specifically Phase 4, but the rest of like the Marvel's pathway is this Doctor Strange movie. Depending on what they do in this movie, that's going to set the tone for everything that comes after.
Yeah.
And so like I'm just hands up, just waiting for it, you know, like take me away, do whatever.
Yeah. And remember, Spider-Man No Way Home was supposed to be a cause and effect from Multiverse of Madness, but now it's the other way around, which I think ups the stakes of Multiverse of Madness because it's coming after No Way Home. This was already a huge epic multiverse movie, and now we're getting Multiverse of Madness after that.
I didn't realize that. I didn't know that it was supposed to come after. That changes so many things in my head now.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Realms, what you got for us, man?
All right, so as a casual Marvel fan, I personally, I'm gonna give it a 10 because yeah, I'm gonna give it a 10, like just off the strength of like how many possibilities it opens up and the different conversations and theories that it sparks in conversation, and off of the strength, like it makes you like hearing all the different conversations, like I know when Parvision was talking about how the villains from the other movies, like right before they die, like, or like they had like that epiphany, it makes me want to go back and watch the old movies. Like, so just all the strength that this movie can make me do that, like I'm still riding the hype train right now. Like for now, I gotta give it a 10. It could change the more I watch it, but like I literally want to go back and watch all the movies again.
I love that. I love that.
I agree with you. So in my video, I actually put down like 9 out of 10. And I think I might have said like, it kind of hurts me to say that. And I talk about why later on in things, certain like plot holes and certain things. But like, if I were just emotionally rate it, I gave it like a 20 out of 10 because of what you said, right? And I feel like the other part of it is like half of the things that I said, they're not even realized yet. Like once they get realized, like, the Spider Island or Web of Realities or whatever thing, those are unrealized potential. So once some of those things get realized, this movie goes like, it just keeps growing. Like that movie just becomes better and better. It's one of those movies where you go past phase 4, you go past phase 5, and you kind of like, wait a second, this is all started in Spider-Man No Way Home. Let me rewatch that movie now. And then you rewatch it with like, oh my God, they had all of this stuff planned since then, So like, that's how I see it too, where it's like somehow they made this movie like a growing movie still. And I love that too.
Yeah, dude. I mean, just before December 17th, 2021, like the whole thing about realization you're saying, it's for some people, it's still sinking in, having Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield coming back and like having to hide those spoilers for such a long time. And then people getting mad that the spoilers were out there before they got to see this movie. For, before then, months leading up to that, that was a realization we were waiting for too. Like, how could there be such a movie with all 3 Spider-Man? Like, that was a realization. And now we've crossed that. And it's just the beginning. It's technically still just the beginning as far as the multiverse comes. So yeah, we're gonna see a lot more of what we saw here. We're gonna see probably 10 times more come Doctor Strange Part 2 in May. So damn, Realms, 10 out of 10. I think the last time you did that was for Catch Me If You Can, right? You gave that also a 10.
I think so.
Ooh.
But yeah, I think that's another reason why I had to give this a 10, because of the press run. Like you're talking about how Tom Holland always does the spoilers. Yeah, it seems like he might have done it like on accident at first, but of course they used it to their advantage, and it was entertaining to watch just the press run leading up to this. So that's another reason why I had to ride the hype train to say 10.
Amazing. All right. Unfortunately, Jurassic Mark could not join us tonight, but he did say he hasn't even seen No Way Home yet. He definitely should. But he did say that his favorite Spider-Man movie was Spider-Man 2. And I wanted to tell him that, like, yo, this movie's technically a sequel to that, but that's also technically a spoiler. So I couldn't even say that. Oh, man. All right. So amazing. So all high scores, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, perfect 10. Whew. Realms, I think it's your turn for the next episode. I think it's your turn, whether or not JM would be here. So
what it is, unfortunately it is. Because like I wanted to say Sonic 2, but it doesn't even release until, it says April 8th.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to do it. But I'm gonna throw out Pokemon, the movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, the redone version,
nice.
The new version.
Finally getting back to the anime, huh? It's about time.
Yeah.
Hey.
Dip my toe back in the water a little bit.
I know. That's a good thing. You have been our resident anime guy, so yeah, good to find out. I'm more of a Digimon guy myself, and remember the first anime film you did nominate, I'm pretty sure, was Digimon the movie. So now we're getting back to what everybody loves, which is Pokemon. So it's Pokemon Mewtwo Strikes Back. It's the second film.
And I definitely peeped it when Parvision said he was watching One Piece. I was like, damn. I gotta get back on it. I love it so far. Like, and I knew when I first started seeing it that I would love it, but it's taken a while to just jump into it because everybody gets intimidated by how many episodes there are. But
yeah.
I'm slowly making my way through.
What episode are you at?
Shit. It's been I want to say almost 2 months since I actually watched it. I want to say I might have been maybe 30, 40 episodes in.
Oh, damn. Yeah. So my wife, like, because I started my channel, she keeps on hearing me and then like sees my comments and people are like, what? And then she's like, how are you getting people so excited about this thing? And so now I've been wanting her to watch it for so long, but 1,000 episodes now, it's hard to get into, but she committed. We're like episode 20 now and she's pretty hooked. And I just want to tell you, like, a certain point, right? Like, so I watched it dubbed, like, in America, right? When it first came out as a kid. And so I watched like the first 100, 150 episodes like that. And then I started watching subbed. But now, like, I never was like a reading person. Now I got into like the manga. And I'm just, like, all this stuff that I just said about like this Marvel stuff, like God Null, all this stuff. This is almost it's not spoiler because like you won't even understand it at this point.
Spoilers don't bother me. at all.
Yeah, so the One Piece thing is crazier than everything I just talked about. Everything, like the conversations, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
damn.
Yeah, and it's just like you're already there. It's a boy about like who's a rubber boy, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
how could it possibly get crazier? But I promise it does. It's insane. It's insane. So definitely get back on that. It's people are like,
I
it's
will.
peak fiction. It's crazy. So
I always laugh because everybody's like, it's got so many episodes, I won't watch it. It's gonna take too long. But then they rewatch Naruto like 4, 5, 6 times. Like, bro, just watch One Piece one time.
yeah. Oh my God. It's if there was one thing I could recommend anyone to watch, it'd be One Piece. Like being on that hype train, it's phenomenal. Like I wasn't ever like I started my channel new, and that's where Oshim, like he saw I was doing entertainment content stuff, and so he brought me on. But in terms of being like even with No Way Home, I wasn't involved like in spoilers or anything like that. But like finally getting an online like connection to all this stuff, it's just like it's insane. It's insane to be a part of that. And I feel like back in the day when Dark Knight came out, when the original Spider-Man came out, like the social media presence that we have now wasn't there. And so like now experiencing these movies with social media, with the content creators, it makes everything way like like you're saying, like you realize new things, you learn new things. You thought we were having like a Dragon Ball Z fight here, and you're just like, like it's just, yeah, it's just One Piece is one of those things that definitely takes the most out of like this modern era that we're in right now.
Yeah.
So
Is it still ongoing? The anime?
yeah.
Wow.
It's still going.
There's no end in sight.
That's why people are scared to jump into it, because they're like, yo, like I'm gonna catch up to where they're at now, but they're gonna be like 1,000 more episodes by the time I get there.
so there was like people have been saying like, oh, there's 5 more years left, but the thing is they forget that Oda, the creator, has been saying 5 more years for every single last 5 years. And so like every like the so he this is just, he's close friends with the creator of Naruto, Kishimoto. And so one example of that, one of the main characters, his name is Sanji, but his original name was Naruto. And so when he found out that Kishimoto's Naruto series was going up, he was just like, I'll change my character name so that there's no conflict in the franchise. And like, there's no overlap. But another thing is like, Naruto is very like, it's a ninja show, very like there's Japanese aspects of it. You know what I mean? So the current arc that we're in One Piece right now is Japanese themed. And that was supposed to come earlier. That was supposed to coincide with the end of Naruto. But so what Oda did was he said that he extended out the series so that it wouldn't coincide and that his thing would come later. But now people are like, this dude is just full of shit. He's just going to continue this thing. And there was a chance in the last chapter where there was like a certain item that I was theorizing. I was telling everyone, I was like, if this thing is what it is, then this series is coming to an end soon. But then this chapter just came out yesterday and parts of that thing is damaged. And so the exact things that would end the series, everyone's just like, oh my God, the series is going to go on for years, like 10 more years. We're going to have grandkids. Yeah, exactly.
You thought it was almost over.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like that's Marvel's situation right now, where Marvel 2008, right? Like, yeah. I can't even picture when Marvel's going to end now. Marvel's going to just continue on with, now that they brought in Loki. I don't want to spoil the end of Loki, but you should watch it because the character there, that character is multiverse. That character is like, we didn't even talk about it here. That character is the center of everything. It's fucking nuts.
There's a lot I got to catch up on, because like I did love it when I was watching it. I don't know why I haven't caught back on.
You started, then you definitely got to finish it. Yeah, because it's relevant definitely. To No Way Home in some capacity as well, because of the whole multiverse shenanigans that are going on.
Yeah. If there's any series to watch, Loki, finish that one. Everything else is kind of like second string to it in terms of like plot. Loki is central to it, 100% central. And the other reason why is originally it was supposed to be 1 season, like longer, but because of the pandemic, I know they reshuffled that and they split it into 2 seasons, and the second season's 2023. And so it kind of feels like phase 4 is gonna have like another like tension point on the second season of Loki. So that one's definitely an important one to watch.
Yeah, I'll definitely finish that one because out of all of the Marvel series that I watched, like I've checked out an episode or two, but Loki was the one that caught me right off the jump.
Yeah, that one's for sure. And then in WandaVision, I'm pretty sure there's ties. Back when WandaVision came out, that's when I knew that they were bringing the X-Men thing 100%, because there was like two things in there that I was like, this is X-Men verse. This is from there. There's no way around it. And then Doctor Strange's movie is now tying it back. So, and then there's also connections with the Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier. There's a whole separate plot line there that's not connected to anything that we're talking about. And honestly, it kind of bothered me because they're doing all this multiverse stuff, and then like Falcon and Winter Soldier is supposed to set up like this like Earth problem, and I'm just like, how are you gonna make this Earth problem and then have like these like gods of darkness and celestials and stuff in the same like storyline? It's so wild.
Yeah. I think, as far as all of the Disney Plus, MCU Disney Plus shows go, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the one that was supposed to be the most grounded, like the most like one that makes you think about like, deep thought-provoking themes as far as what you can relate to real world wise.
I could tell you that you mentioned that you asked like Black Widow, how does that relate? Black Widow relates to the Winter Soldier. You probably remember why, right?
Now that I'm all caught up, yes.
Yeah, so something I would recommend if you have free time is there's an ABC show called Agent Carter. I watched that one, and that's how all of those movies tie together. If that makes sense, that organization, and they haven't mentioned it explicitly, but that organization's presence is like I don't even know, they haven't announced a movie for them, so I don't know why they're doing all this setup, but like, it's not really spoiler. Can I just say what they're setting up?
Go ahead. Might as well.
Okay. It's I forgot the name of it. Yeah, so I mean, it's not confirmed, so it's just a theory, but the Thunderbolts. Yeah, that's what the setup is for. Yeah. So the Avengers are gone and they're going to be replaced by the Thunderbolts. And so Black Widow at the beginning of it set up the general
Ross.
Yeah, and he's supposed to become Red Hulk.
Oh,
and they set that up at the beginning of Black Widow with Black Widow saying like don't you have like a surgery to get to or something?
Oh yes.
And then at the end of Black Widow, they and now Hawkeye, the Black Widow, and Yelena. Then and then Winter Soldier, they have the Captain America replacement, and then Captain Carter's that series explains that lady who's connecting all the dots, her role.
Valentina, I think.
Yeah, her role is that organization that is like the triple spy thing into Hydra, into Shield. There's that other organization. So like they already have 3 components of the Thunderbolts or 4 components. So it's like, and we haven't even talked about that. They haven't even talked about a movie for it, but they have the setup for it. So I'm just like, what are they doing here? How are they setting this up?
Oh man. Okay.
Trying to be sneaky.
Yeah.
To the casual fans.
If they decide to keep Daredevil, the series canon as well, then there's another candidate for Thunderbolts. Parvision, you haven't seen Daredevil, but out of all the Netflix Marvel shows, that's the one that I would recommend the most. And if you get to the end of season 3, there is another candidate there potentially, if they decide to make it canon.
I think they did say they retconned and said that the Netflix things are canon.
Okay. So Bullseye, if you're familiar with the Daredevil villain Bullseye, he's in the end of season 3 of Daredevil, and I think they might recruit him as well for Thunderbolts. That remains to be seen. That depends on how much they want to like retcon and keep from the Daredevil series. But yeah, that's what I recommend to you, jumping off at the end of this podcast. So
yeah, sounds good.
We went much longer than I thought we would, but this was, this movie was an event. Let's be honest. Like this was an event during this pandemic, right? It's really brought people together. So yeah, finally, this concludes this episode of Movie Guys Improvise. You have been listening to the voices of
Filled with realms.
Oshim, the one and only, and our special guest.
Parvision. Thank you guys for having me again. I really enjoyed the time here.
Pleasure having you here. And for all those who have been tuned in and listening, thank you for listening to us ramble about this movie for nearly 2 hours now. And catch us again next month for Pokemon the Movie 2, Mewtwo Strikes Back. Is that the whole? Did I get it right? Okay, cool.
I think so.
Cool. Peace out.
We out.